Today we are going to be painting up a zombie beholder, which should be a lot of fun because when you paint the undead, you're allowed to be a little bit more sloppy than usual. I had some really good ideas that I wanted to try on this miniature, and we're going to do a lot of transitions between colors here. And the first thing we're going to start off with is what I'll call the rotten portion of our beholder. I want a green rotten skin look, so we're going to be painting the first half, or one half of the beholder, that starting off with our olive brown to get a nice good drab greenish brown color, and then we're going to work our way up from there. Now, as I said, when you paint the undead, you can be a little bit more, I hate to use the word sloppy, but you can, because you got rotted flesh and you have lots of different effects happening there with decomposition, so it's not the same as a smooth, perfect skin where you don't want to show any brush strokes. But in this situation, dry brushing is perfectly fine, and then in the later stages we'll start moving up to a little bit of layering and just blend away any wicked brush strokes that we don't want to see. I usually don't give paint to water ratios for layering because I don't know them myself. I just do it all by eye, but you can tell here I have the paint much thicker than normal and we can actually see the brush strokes. So even though I am technically layering here, it's only about a rough guess 1 to 3 paint to water ratio because I kind of want some of those brush strokes to show up here to have a different effect on the skin, so it's not nice and smooth, it's a bit more chunky, which is beneficial for our undead beholder. Our zombie here is a little bit too clean, so I want to add some damage to him, and we're going to be adding some open sores starting off with black red. And this is actually the exact same method that you would use if you were painting chips or rust spots on a vehicle. We're going to use the exact same method. We're going to shade towards the top and highlight towards the bottom. The only difference here is that we are, of course, using different colors. I got a little bit too carried away doing all these open sores. Much like with paint chips and scratches on a vehicle, they make a lot more sense if they're kept small and also isolated in logical places like on the edges of vehicles or in the recesses where you would find rust. Here, I did them a bit too overall. I should have kept them a little bit more concentrated in just a few areas. It looks a lot more realistic if you have one area that's damaged repeatedly in that one area rather than having the same spot of damage repeated all over the entire beholder. So keep your wounds concentrated. Alright, here comes the fun part. I didn't just want a simple green undead beholder. What I had in my mind was actually I wanted basically a two-tone beholder. So his rotting started on one side, and then on the other side he still retains his regular beholder color. In this case, we're going to go for a blue beholder, a little bit more into the gray range, figuring it's starting to fade a little bit. But basically the right rear section started off with our shadow gray and started to layer that in just like we would have any highlight, a little bit thicker maybe, but we are layering it in so some of the green still shows through. And then I decided to put in the shade first with Oxford Blue before working on the highlights. And while I have this blue-gray color concentrated towards the back and the right of the beholder, I have little spots of it here and there. So I did a little bit on the tentacle, a little bit around the face, just little sporadic spots. So kind of like what I should have done with the sores. The blue is concentrated all in one area with just a few spots here and there extending out from that area. We have two colors, main colors, on our beholder, but I didn't want to stop there. I wanted to add a little bit of a flesh tone to him, some underlying flesh color of the beast, and going with tan because it has a slight human skin quality to it. And if you can add some humanness to a zombie, I think it really adds to the terror, even if it's an alien creature. If you see something recognizably, at least in color, to a real person, I think it makes it a little bit, more scary, more creepy. And then to extend that human flesh look a little bit more on to the rest of the creature, adding a glaze here, tan, pale flesh, and gory red. And just glazing some of the areas that we painted green to give them a slight pinkish tint. Also, if you notice back when we highlighted the blue-gray area, I also used pale flesh there. That's because I'm trying to tie these two areas together. There's a very slight hint of pinkish flesh in the blue, and then now we're adding more here on the green side. Decided to add a little bit more shade here and there for all the colors that we previously used, especially the human skin areas, and using hex lichen for that, which is a nice purple, shades the blue well, makes the green look creepy, shades the skin tone. Also, it's the same color that we used in the mouth, so rather than having this isolated area purple in the center of the beholder, we're using a little bit of that color throughout the entire project. Ties it together much, much nicer. Rather than going for bright white or off-white spikes, wanted a darker color to make them stand out less. Even though we're using a lot of colors on our beholder here, they're all very muted colors. We have very drab blues and drab green, so trying to keep the same drab look with the spikes as well. Alright, now we gotta paint a whole bunch of eyes, and once again, we're going for a drab look here. This is an undead beholder, so rather than using what I normally would, which would be white or off-white, a circle of black, and then start putting the color in, instead I went with, I think it was beige for the eyeballs. Could have been buff, sorry, forgot to write it down. And then did a neutral gray circle, and now I'm starting to work in the colors. In this case, with the red, I worked in camo black brown because I don't want a bright, intense red. I want a dull, lifeless eyeball on them. So adding some brown to it really helps to dull it. And also with the highlights, rather than adding again, if this was a normal red highlight, we can add yellow, we can add a flesh tone, we can add orange. Instead, I'm using khaki, which is going to bleach out the red a little bit and also dull it because it's kind of a dark off-white color. And then for the pupil, once again, here comes that khaki to dull our black, so we get a much more lifeless looking eyeball. In the beginning, my initial plan was to put some very thin glazes of white or off-white over the eyeballs to give them a milky appearance, which would have worked, but I kind of liked it just the way it was, so I didn't want to mess it up. It looked dull enough with using the khaki and all the browns on the eyeballs. I did add a little bit of red around the eyes to make them look a little bit more bloodshot, which I used GW's Carlsberg Crimson for that. Mainly just because I wanted to try it and it doesn't work well. Using a regular thinned red paint or red ink would have worked much better. So that's what I get for being lazy. And there we go. There is our undead beholder. And I really like how he came out. That was a quick 2-evening paint job. And it actually came out how I wanted it to come out. I had a plan in mind going into it, and it actually was executed correctly, and I didn't have any major issues, or I didn't have to change plans at any point, so that's a rarity. Yay. Two things. First of all, I forgoed adding a gloss coat anywhere onto the holder. I was initially going to do one on the eyes and also on the mouth, but I kind of like the dry look better. I think it looks very, well, it looks like a dried out beholder, so I decided to keep that. Secondly, when it comes to painting undead, don't just, paint them green and then just give them a wash of a dark green or a brown or whatever. You can work in a lot of different colors. You can see here we have greens, and we got blues, we got grays, we got reds, we got purples, all working in cohesion, and gives us this nice, cool, multi-effect look on our beholder. So if you're painting your own zombies, add a little color here and there. Don't just do all one color on them. Mix it up. Try some new things, and you'll get some decent results, hopefully. Anyway, hope this inspired. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Good night, Mother.
Good night, John Boy.
Good night, Hardcastle.
Good night, McCormick.
Good night, Chief.
Good night, McLeod.